You just read.
Okay. All right. We'll now move on to the second panel to hear testimony on H.R. 444, the Guam World War II Loyalty and Recognition Act, introduced by our colleague from Guam, Congresswoman Bordalo. All right. A week from today, July 21st, 2011, is the 67th anniversary of American troops liberating Guam. It is my understanding that this morning, Congresswoman Bordalo, with Ranking Member Sablan and Governor Calvo, all right, honored the lives lost during the liberation of Guam by the 3rd Marine Division and 77th Infantry Division in 1944 at a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknowns at Arlington National Cemetery. Arlington Cemetery is a reminder to all of us of the ultimate sacrifice brave American military personnel, both men and women, have paid for the price of freedom in this country. Unspeakable actions occurred during the war. I don't think anyone will disagree that the residents of Guam were subjected to many horrors during the 32 months of Japanese occupation. Horrible acts were occurring in every occupied area during World War II. The 79th U.S. Congress responded quickly to the plight of Guam's residents, and in 1945 passed the Guam Meritorious Claims Act to provide immediate relief to the residents of Guam. The act paid 4,356 individuals over $8 million. Congress also passed the Guam Land Transfer Act and Guam Rehabilitation Act. The Guam Meritorious Claims Act is said to have been the primary means of settling war claims for the people of Guam. The Guam Land Transfer Act enabled land exchanges for resettlement purposes, and the Guam Rehabilitation Act appropriated $6 million for construction and was the means for economic rehabilitation. While I understand that H.R. 44 has been considered in previous Congresses, this is my first opportunity to review this measure, as it may be for other members of this subcommittee. I understand from my preparation for this hearing that many people here today believe the Guam Meritorious Claim Act was a start in the process, but it was incomplete and did not adequately compensate the residents of Guam in comparison to other war claims statutes. It's also my understanding from the documents in the Guam Review Commission report that the intent of the Guam Meritorious Claim Act was not to make Guam residents whole. Instead, it was, at least with regard to property, to provide people relief. I'm concerned that if we go forward with this legislative proposal, we could be opening Congress up to additional war claims. Documents in the Commission report make note of some 400,000 Americans who suffered injury in World War II who never received compensation for their injuries. The president of the Heritage Foundation notes that the U.S. bears no blame here and no responsibility. We fought to prevent the island from being taken by the Japanese and fought to free it again. Some 3,000 Americans were killed and more than 7,000 wounded in the 1944 battle for the island. That's a price paid in blood that can never be made up in mere dollars. Even the Guam War Claims Review Commission stated that the U.S. government is not obligated as a matter of law to pay such compensation. During this hearing, I hope to find out why there is a need for additional compensation, who will be compensated under H.R. 44, why the Japanese government did not pay the initial compensation in 1945, and how the federal government is going to pay more than $100 million when we are nearly $15 trillion in debt. As I indicated at the beginning of the statement, I am deeply sympathetic to those living in Guam during the occupation of the Japanese Imperial Army. They were treated in a particularly oppressive, cruel, and barbaric way. Sadly, paying this compensation will not bring back the dead, nor will it undo the 32 months of hell which they endured. I look forward to hearing the testimony of our distinguished witnesses and now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Sablan, for any statement he would like to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 44, the Guam World War II Loyalty Recognition Act, which is sponsored by my colleague and friend, Congresswoman Madeline Bordalo, would implement the recommendations of a federal commission that was authorized by the 107th Congress to look at this specific issue. The Commission found that the people of Guam were treated unfairly during the war claims process immediately following World War II as compared with other claims programs authorized by Congress addressing similarly experienced losses and damages for other Americans. Each of the 4 delegates from Guam to have served in the House have worked diligently to resolve this long-standing injustice faced by their constituents, and the text of H.R. 44 has passed the House on 5 separate occasions. It is long past time that we resolve this issue and provide relief for the people of Guam for the nearly 3 years of brutal occupation they suffered because of their steadfast loyalty to our country and nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to make this opening statement. I want to welcome all of our witnesses, especially former Congressman Ben Blas, again Governor Calvo, Mr. Pulo, and Mr. Tamargo, and look forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Mrs. Bodala for any statement she would like to make on her bill.
I thank you very much, Chairman Laundrie and Ranking Member Sablan. And I would like to thank both of you for holding today's hearings on H.R. 44, the Guam World War II Loyalty Recognition Act, which I introduced on the first day of the 112th Congress. And I want to thank Chairman Hastings and Ranking Member Markey for their agreeing to allow a hearing on H.R. 44 as well. I also want to acknowledge Speaker Juan Pat of the 31st Guam Legislature. She has traveled here to Washington and has submitted written testimony for the committee. And I'd like to turn this over to the chairman now. All right.
Without objection, so ordered.
The One Guam approach in resolving this issue is something that's very, very important. And I always appreciate the participation and the input of our legislative leaders, and pleasure to include her testimony in the record. And finally, I would like to thank and recognize each of our witnesses here today. Governor Calvo, we appreciate your traveling to D.C. to provide testimony in both of today's panels. We will appreciate your input on the importance of passing H.R. 44. General Ben Blas, a very distinguished gentleman who has served in this Congress from 1985 to 1992. He is also a retired Marine and is a survivor, which is why he is here today, of the Japanese occupation of Guam. General Blas's testimony today speaks to the atrocities and the hardships endured by our people during the brutal enemy occupation. And further, General Blas's experience as a general in the U.S. Marine Corps can speak to the importance of building good relationships with the civilian community and the significance of the passage of Guam war claims would have to building this type of relationship in Guam. Another witness today, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank Mr. Mauricio Tamargo. He is the former chairman of the Guam War Claims Review Commission for his testimony. And in all these years, he has stood by us to help us get this bill through. Mr. Tamargo understands the issue of the Guam War claims, and I appreciate his expert testimony. He has also held public hearings on this issue, as well as a public hearing in Guam. And finally, I also want to thank the testimony of Mr. Nick Pula. I appreciate the administration's continued support of H.R. 44. Today's hearing builds on the lengthy and substantive legislative record that has already been developed on H.R. 44. The issue of Guam war claims is a sensitive issue for my constituents, and it is an issue that can only be resolved through legislation by Congress. Further, it is a matter that has maintained strong support in the House. As Ranking Member Sablan said, it has passed this House 5 times, even across party lines. Further, the bipartisan nature of our witnesses speaks to H.R. 44's broad base of support. The need for this Congress to take action and resolve the matter of Guam war claims heightens by the day. Continued popular support for the military buildup on Guam is tied to a great extent to finally solving this long-standing issue on Guam. My constituents wonder how we can spend over $10 billion in military construction, but their suffering and patriotism during the Imperial Japanese occupation of Guam is yet to be fully recognized and redressed. In part, it is for this reason that I attach H.R. 44 as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act in fiscal years 2010 and 2011. Unfortunately, the Senate failed to act on the standalone measure in the 110th and 111th Congresses. Further, last year we did reach a compromise position on Guam war claims, and it was incorporated into conference version of the FY11 NDAA. However, due to the unique legislative procedure that was required for passage, a few senators blocked its inclusion in the final legislation. This, unfortunately, is a circumstance that many bills face in the Senate. So it is important that we build off the agreed-upon compromise, and I believe today's hearing will clearly highlight the importance of this legislation. As such, on the first day of this Congress, I reintroduced H.R. 44, and the text of this bill is identical to the compromise reached with Chairman Levin and Ranking Member McCain. The bill removes the most controversial claimant category of payments to the descendants of survivors of the Japanese occupation. I did so reluctantly, but in a recognition that including that category would not pass in the Senate. So I'm hopeful that this hearing will further eliminate the facts and circumstances surrounding the occupation endured by the people and the injustice that they hope will finally be redressed by this Congress. This is an injustice rooted in their having been treated differently from their fellow Americans by the federal government in redressing their war claims. The hearing today presents another opportunity to review this history, however painful it may be to recount and repeat. We further this discussion today in the name and the pursuit of justice, and with faith in our government and her cherished principle of equal protection under the law. We must also remain focused and determined because of the very findings and the recommendations of now 2 federal commissions that have independently and thoroughly examined this matter against all its political and legal sensitivities. The last hearing on Guam war claims was held on December 2nd, 2009, before the House Armed Services Committee. And at that time, our survivor witness was Mr. Tom Barcinas. Mr. Barcinas told the committee of his firsthand experience during World War II and of the atrocities suffered by him and his family at the hands of the enemy. And I'm going to quote something he said. "Through the grace of God, I survived World War II. But like so many others who lived through those days, lived through the war, who have since died, I am quickly getting old, as you can see. So many who lived through the war are advancing in age, and so many have passed on without closure to the issues arising because of the war. Mr. Chairman, no one must underestimate the importance of resolving the issue of parity, fairness, and justice related to the administration of the war claims. Resolving these issues will provide, beyond any reasonable doubt, that America does live up to its promises and its responsibilities," unquote. Just this past April, only 3 months ago, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barcinas passed away after waiting nearly 70 years for closure and recognition that he never, ever received. So it is important that Congress act now to implement the Review Commission's recommendations and finally resolve this long-standing injustice for the survivors of the occupation of Guam. And I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome. I think Ms. Wadola. At this time, I would like to enter